Welcome to the Combinations Podcast, the podcast from North Staffordshire Combined Healthcare NHS Trust. And today we've got another episode of Beyond the Board with our Chief People Officer, Frieza Mahmood. And today's guest is Prem Gabbi, one of the non-executive directors, who's going to tell his story and his path to Combined and why he enjoys working here and also being part of the leadership team to make a difference at Combined Healthcare. So with that said, over to you, Frieza.
Hello and welcome. Prem, would you mind just introducing yourself and telling me a little bit more about you?
Yeah, hi Fraser. So my name is Prem Gabbi. I'm a non-executive director and I joined Combined in February 25, so just over a year. A little bit about me, background. I'm an accountant by training, so I qualified too many years ago to remember. I'm married. I have two, I say kids, but actually they're adults. One's 24, 25, and one's 22. They both recently had their birthdays in the early part of this year. But like most people now, I suspect they find that their kids don't leave home and actually stay with you because everything's so difficult at the moment. I am, I would say, I always describe myself as first generation. My parents arrived in this country in the 60s. My dad was a carpenter, effectively, when he first arrived, and it was during that time, post-war, when there was still quite a lot of immigration going on, especially into this country to try and rebuild the country. There's big growth spurt in building and houses and roads and stuff like that in the infrastructure. He came in the 60s, and I was born here, and I grew up in the 70s and the 80s.
Yeah, interesting time.
It was a very interesting time. It was, unfortunately, what we're seeing now with the likes of reform, etc., was the sort of period that I grew up in. It's a shame, really, that I'm seeing those times again. It takes me back to my childhood of growing up in the 70s and the 80s. When it was a bit more prevalent.
Very tough.
Yeah, so that's a little bit about me.
That's really helpful. Just to kind of give us a bit more feel for you as an individual. I was just chuckling to myself when you were talking about, they're not really kids. Or I think in my experience, they stay kids forever. I'm middle aged and I still think of myself as my my parents' kid. And you're right. The economic pressures and all the other things make it so that things are difficult. I think a lot of the people that will be listening to the podcast can probably relate to that, either from being a parent perspective or being a child who's desperate to break out of the home environment and kind of set out on their own. And we have to be mindful that not people, in some sad ways, the opportunities are diminishing for younger people to be able to, to really take advantage of everything that life is about in a way that we once did. But you're right, in some ways things also are coming back full circle in terms of some of those other social tensions that are playing out, that are impacting kind of community cohesion and things. And I think you just lightly touched on it, but it sounds like it was a tough time to grow up in the 70s and 80s, and some of the things that you would have experienced would have been really challenging as well during that period.
I mean, it's we talk about lived experience, and a lot of instances, and I grew up in Coventry in the 70s. Very, very similar demographic to Stoke in many ways. Social deprivation, poverty, that kind of thing. I still remember the first house when I was I suppose gained a bit of a consciousness, is that we didn't have an inside toilet or a bath. You had to go outside. Into the garden where there was an outhouse, as it was known as, and you had a tin bath, in there. That's what I remember from the early childhood. Growing up in that sort of era, that sort of environment, and it was, as you said, the sort of thing of actually you get your 1 square meal a day sort of thing. It was that kind of thing. And going to school. you wouldn't get this nowadays. But going to school and having a dinner ticket pinned on you because you're entitled to free meal.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think in some ways it kind of gives you appreciation for everything that you have, and probably through that struggle it maybe has instilled some principles or some sort of values in you as well, which I think that whilst there can be difficult and challenging experiences, it's also something that you can and obviously have, I think I can see from the interactions we've had, taken forward and try to channel in a positive way as well. So tell me about a little bit more about how your life kind of progressed from those, I guess more humble beginnings really. Although I hasten to say that because when I sort of talk to my parents, having similar sort of background to yourself, being born in this country and having parents kind of being here, coming here in the sort of 70s and in the 80s, if I dare to ever complain about anything, they would kind of compare it to a stark example of something where they had a more difficult, more detrimental sort of start in life. So I guess that is difficult. But would you kind of give me a little bit more insight into kind of how life progressed for you?
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't begrudge my sort of childhood or anything like that. It was great times. Because there was this massive sense of community.
Absolutely.
Times. I just remember as kids, you could you were running up and down the street through people's houses. And there's people, from all different backgrounds. There are people from Pakistan, Bangladesh. People actually in England, and the Caribbean, etc. So all the kids would just play, and you had that tremendous sense of community. Everyone knew each other on the street, and you had from that respect, I don't really I look back on my childhood with a bit of fondness in that respect. The stuff that we used to be able to, we used to get up to as just children, I suppose, just normal stuff, rather than being on our phones and everything.
Yeah, totally.
Didn't exist. But I think, as you know this, and most I suppose Asian people would know this, is that parents pushed me into education. They were like, I wanted to play football, but they wanted me to study. So that was my sort of, I suppose, my way out, if you want, to try and sort of build a better life, was education. And obviously fortunate enough to do well at school, the first person in my family to go to university, and I studied finance, and when I left university, I managed to get a job at EY, or Ernst & Young as it was then, to train as an accountant. And since then it's been sort of using that professional qualification to actually enhance or better myself. But you never stop learning and growing. And after Ernst & Young, I started at National Grid, and back in 1997. And I only left National Grid last year, after 28 years.
Long time,
It's a long time, I did various finance roles, more traditional roles, financial management, accounting, and I managed to seek or get promotions, and I got up to finance director, then eventually managing director of the property division there, and it was great. Learned so much, learned so much about business, but also learned so much about people, because one of the things I certainly learned in my career is the higher up you get, the less you need to know, but more you need to know about people.
Totally, absolutely. And I think that is one of the unique things about our organization as well, is that we've got a wealth of talent and a lot of kind of different perspectives, different skill sets and values that people bring. And it sounds like you've had a really interesting career. I can only imagine some of the challenges that you would have faced at Ernst and Young, and possibly at the time that you joined as well. Maybe there weren't a lot of other people that you can identify with that were sort of from a similar background to yourself. I might be wrong about that. I don't know.
No, I think there was two others. maybe three, others or three. So in a group of about 50 odd people, there was about maybe 4 or 5 of us who were from a global majority background, which was, and it was different. It was a different era in the early 90s as it was, and they were still quite strict on things like you couldn't wear a suit that wasn't black, grey, or blue.
Oh, gosh.
If you turned them in anything other than that, you were sort of going, that's not appropriate. And to the point, you had to wear a tie, obviously. Something we don't do either. And even to the point of women weren't allowed to wear trousers. They were told to wear skirts. So could you imagine growing up in, going to work and being told that you could only wear a skirt?
Gosh, yeah. God. When you think about it, it's not that long ago, really. Like when you think it's quite a fundamental sort of culture shift during that time. And I think it's very interesting then, because you went to National Grid, and that is probably again a different sort of culture, different environment. And you stayed there a long time, so there must have been something about that environment that that 28 years. That's a big chunk of your life, isn't it? That was sort of conducive to making you feel like, well, yeah, this is something that I feel like I can contribute to in a really positive way.
Yeah, I think the thing for me about National Grid was that it is a company that's based on treating its employees right.
Yeah.
And it had what I would say is a purpose. It was a purpose-driven or led organisation, and yes, it was. I mean, it's effectively an asset management business. It builds infrastructure. We've all seen the pylons and we've all seen the cables and stuff like that. Yeah. But at the heart of it, it is quite people-centric in terms of what it's trying to do.
Yeah.
One of the things that really, one of the reasons why I stayed there for so long is a lot of the policies were people-centric. So similar to what we've got at the Combined.
Yeah.
About well-being, about mental health, about supporting our staff. Those kinds of policies that the company had appealed to me, and also then appealed to me when I looked at applying to Combined and becoming a non-exec director here, because it had those similarities where I could see those same sort of policies and traits about looking after your people, because if you look after your people, you'll get the right outcomes.
Yeah.
And I think one of the great things I saw, but when I was in National Grid, it was empowerment and trust.
Yeah.
You've got to empower your people and trust them to get on with the jobs that they're employed for. And I'm a firm believer in nobody turns up to work to do a bad job.
Yeah.
People come to work. I always give them the benefit of the doubt. People come to work because they want to do a job. Yes, we all have good days and bad days, but actually, fundamentally, the purpose that is the right purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. So you touched a little bit on some of the parallels between National Grid and the Trust. Are there any other things that sort of informed your decision to come to work for the Trust? Is it your first non-executive director role, or is it, have you had other experiences that have been similar to that before?
Yeah, it's not my first one. I'm actually a board trustee at a multi-academy trust in Birmingham. They're based in Birmingham, but it covers sort of Staffordshire, Worcestershire areas as well. So we've got 11 primary schools, and I've been doing that for eight years. And that's what really first sort of sparked my sort of, if you want, non-exec career.
Yeah.
So when I went to the school for the very first time, which was in Smethwick in Birmingham, if people know Birmingham.
Very familiar with it.
When I first went into that school and saw the little kids in the actual school, it reminded me of me.
Yeah,
I'll be really honest. It reminded me of me growing up, attending primary and junior school. And a lot of the, if you want, those areas in inner city Birmingham, you've got high people from global majority backgrounds who, not necessarily have English as a first language. But that really sort of got to me, in the sense that actually, how can I help create opportunities for this next lot of children, so they could be the next Prem or the next Fraser or the
absolutely.
next, wherever it was. But it's trying to create those opportunities, because a lot of the children are coming from deprived backgrounds.
Yeah.
So that's what sort of sparked my sort of initial sort of interest in being a non-exec.
Yeah.
And then I think my sort of thought process, my thinking evolved, and it quickly worked out that actually there's probably three things, and they're all public services. If you think about it, education, health, and housing. Which all are sort of interconnected. They're linked, and people, especially children, will develop mental health issues if they don't have a stable, family environment or decent housing. And you certainly, when I attended the first few meetings that combined, it just became more and more evident to me, that you see children now, and many of the people listening on this podcast would know, because they have first-hand experience of children turning up, because the sort of home environment has become so stressful. And part of that, schools are trying their best, but a lot of it's, I suppose, it's funding related, but it's also the way social media and electronics and all of that stuff has evolved. It's causing, for some, we use this very frankly, when I was bullied at school, somebody had to be standing opposite me. To be able to do it. That doesn't have to happen these days, and it's a lot harder to deal with those pressures, which I think does contribute towards more issues for the next generations, or the next generations of grown up.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. They're under constant sort of spotlight of scrutiny, aren't they? And around, there's quite a lot in social media around how children should look, the way children should behave, the lifestyle, etc. they should aspire to. So, even more pressure perhaps than we grew up with in many ways. I can definitely identify with what you're saying, Prem, and do a similar trustee role myself, and it's very humbling. Like it's a privilege to do it, and it gives you that connection, with feeling like something meaningful. So I can definitely see, how you would be able to bring that into your approach at Combined, and Combined definitely is the right place for you to make a difference, even in the 12 months that you've been here, which I know I've only known you for part of that time, sort of since starting the trust in June. You can see how you're asking those, questions, bringing those perspectives forward that show that this needs to be joined up, and the focus of the trust is much more on early intervention, working together with other partners and agencies. So is there anything sort of in that space that makes you think, right, knowing that and seeing, the art of the possible with my, the other roles that I've been able to do, as a good public servant, essentially, you're giving back, aren't you? That's what you're doing. There's something in your personal sort of values or drive that's making you do that, because you could be, playing golf or doing something else, which I'm not saying you don't play golf, but you could have more, spare time. So there's something that's driving you to do it. And you can see, an opportunity. So would you tell me a little bit more about that and what you're hoping to achieve, like with the support you're giving to the trust?
Yeah, firstly, I have tried to play golf. I'm terrible at it.
Me too.
But I will probably persist, because a lot of my my friends do play. So, I think social purpose thing about giving back is definitely where my headspace went. Certainly when I was dealing with the schools, and as I was sort of approaching, I suppose, the end of my sort of career at National Grid. There is this thing about, actually, I don't really want to be sort of just sitting on my hands or playing golf all the time. I needed to find something else, which aligned with, I suppose, my personal motivation to actually just how can make things better for this next generation of people that are coming through. And yes, that was behind my thinking for when I applied for this role at Combined. And it was that thinking about how can I get into joining those three areas of education, health, and housing. And as I mentioned, that grid, we did I did property, and part of that was dealing a couple of times. We did deal with social housing associations. One in the Midlands and a couple down south. But you could just see, that pressure, or I suppose the negative connotations of not having decent housing, and how that impacts people. And also the safety element of it, how do people feel safe in their communities? And that's the housing aspect of it. And in my head, it was that piece of actually how do I give back? How can I sort of contribute to creating these kinds of communities? And part of that role of when we were doing some property development in London, in my last role, one of the things you certainly got to understand was how creating a sense of community is sort of key to actually improving health outcomes, but also education outcomes. And that's the housing bit. And so you could see that element of it, but then you need to join the other bits up as well. And for me, I saw that there's a chance for me to give back. I can do things, and certainly try and help shape organisations or influence organisations, so that actually we're making the right decisions, to use the limited resources that we have to produce the best outcomes for whether it's children, whether it's for patients, or for customers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think really admirable ambition, and many of the people that will be listening to this podcast will be able to identify with that, definitely, because you see people, don't you, in all sort of shapes and forms, giving much more of themselves than is actually required, because they don't see it as just a job. It's that sort of difference, value add that you talked about, the social sort of benefits as well. That's, I think, driving a lot of people. So I think we're coming to the end of our time, and you've had the opportunity to give us a little bit more insight into who you are as an individual, the experiences that have shaped you, and some of the things that that you've been able to do and have an aspiration to want to do here. But would you mind just taking this last bit of time that we've got together, taking the opportunity to just let me know anything that you in particular are interested in hearing about from our staff, because I know you're very keen on doing the visits out to different areas, connecting with different teams, and to being visible and accessible as a NED. That's intrinsic to your approach. So is there anything particular that'd be good for you to hear from our staff about, or that is an area of interest for you?
I think for me, although I've been here a year, I think we've been out on a few visits, and I've actually got one later this week.
Oh, have you?
I'll be at Harplands later this week. I think for me, it's actually just hearing from the staff on the front line, so to speak, because I think one of the things that certainly I've learned throughout my career is people in boardrooms aren't the ones who actually understand, what needs to change to make things better. It's the people on the front line, and that's why these, the board to team visits are so important, and why the teams need to be open and honest as they feel comfortable being, because we on the board do see, I suppose, data, and we see reports and analysis and commentary from people like yourself, Frieza, from the execs. But I think it's important for all board members to actually get out on and meet the teams firsthand and hear firsthand both the challenges but also the successes, because I think most organizations, and Combined isn't any worse or better than any others, but most organizations are not very good at sort of celebrating their successes. Combined has quite a lot of successes. We've seen that I've seen that over the last year. So it's really, for me, is just be honest and sing your own praises as well. as well as sort of, ask us for what you need in terms of support from the board.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you heard it here, everyone, we want to hear about the things that you're proud of as much as the areas that we can help you to be able to improve on. So please take that challenge. And I would want to give a final thanks to Prem for his time. It's been a lovely conversation, and I know I've got lots out of it, and I'm sure you have as well. And keep listening, because we will be speaking to all of our board colleagues, and we would love to be able to engage you as well in these podcasts, and there'll be an opportunity for you to do that. Prem, once again, huge thanks for your participation today. Thank you.